Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into a really fascinating, highly unique spiritual cosmology. We're going to unpack a metaphysical framework that literally attempts to synthesize the entirety of human religious history into one massive, cohesive cosmic system. So, let's get right into it. Okay, so let's kick things off with the ultimate question. It's the central human dilemma right at the heart of our source material today. How do we as humans comprehend a God that we literally cannot see? It's the ultimate barrier, right? The barrier of invisible faith. I mean, when a concept is just so phenomenally vast, how does a human mind, bound by the physical limitations of this world, begin to wrap its head around it without completely losing the plot? Well, to explore that massive question, we're relying strictly on a specific text today, the true heart of ancient Inca king Rient Cloud. Specifically, our goal is to impartially unpack the highly detailed theology laid out in Chapter 5. Now, just to be clear up front, we're not here to take sides or debate theology. We're just here to decode the fascinating framework that this text lays out for us. Here's the roadmap for today. First, the challenge of invisible faith. Second, defining El Cantar. Third, prophets as partial reflections. And finally, King Croud's cosmic mission.
Moving right into Section 1, the challenge of invisible faith.
According to the source material, this fundamental barrier to invisible faith really boils down to a matter of pure scale. The text asserts that the supreme deity of the universe is of such an incomprehensible magnitude that for everyday humans living our daily lives, grasping the entirety of this being is, well, practically impossible. It's kind of like trying to understand the entire ocean by studying a single drop of water. The sheer scale of it makes it incredibly difficult to grasp, which the text argues is exactly why humanity has struggled so much with faith throughout history. Which brings us to Section 2, defining Alcantare. Chapter 5 of the text explicitly defines the supreme being, named El Cantare. And the source document describes El Cantare not just as some local deity, but as a giant supreme earth god. But honestly, the scale goes even further than that. The text notes that this entity was actively involved in the creation of the stars themselves and the very foundation of our planet. So we are talking about the absolute top of the cosmological hierarchy in this framework, a being of vast cosmic responsibility. But that begs the question, right? If El Cantare is that massive, how does this framework explain the huge array of different religions we actually see here on Earth? Let's look at Section 3, prophets as partial reflections. The text actually uses a really practical analogy to explain this diversity. It says, just as there are 5 or 10 fingers, each with its own function. It essentially argues that historical religious figures are like functional fingers attached to a single, much larger cosmic hand. They each have a very distinct purpose, a specific area of expertise, but they all ultimately stem from the exact same source. So the text frames historical figures like Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad not as independent, competing gods, but rather as fractional slices of El Cantare's totality. The source material explicitly states that these major prophets conveyed only a part of the whole picture. They are partial expressions, perfectly tailored to the specific time and place they appeared. This contrast is exactly how the text handles the differences between world religions. It points out that when Jesus brought his teachings, they were heavily tinged with his own specific personality and individuality, bringing a divine attribute of love. On the flip side, the text explains that the teachings of Buddha were deeply shaped by his specific historical context, rooted in thousands of years of Indian ascetic history. Both are parts of El Cantare for sure, but they look entirely different because of the earthly vessels they used and the historical eras they incarnated into. They conveyed the truth, but they did it infused with their own distinct individuality. So, the real takeaway here is that earthly messengers has strict limits. According to this theology, no single prophet could ever capture the absolute entirety of El Cantar. Why? Well, because they're bound by human capacity. They are shaped by the era they're born into, and therefore they can only convey pieces of the ultimate whole. I mean, think about it. If they tried to bring the entire immense truth of El Cantar down all at once, the human vessel, and frankly human society as a whole, just wouldn't be able to process it. It would just be too much. And that leads us to Section 4, King Croud's cosmic mission. Now let's zoom in a bit. If we look directly at Chapter 5 of the source text, we see King Croud's highly specific, esoteric assignment. The text clearly outlines his involvement not just in earthly politics, but in what it calls the cosmic dharma. The text explains that King Croud acts as a specialized branch spirit.
His specific role in this grand cosmic machine is to be a guide for humanity regarding these massive cosmic laws. Because that overarching truth of Cantare is just too vast to grasp on its own. King Croud's job, essentially, is translation. He's in charge of making that invisible faith actually understandable to everyday people.
Let's walk through the logical progression of his spiritual job description, according to the text. Step 1. He exists as a branch spirit, a direct energetic offshoot of Cantare. Step 2. His assigned domain is to oversee the space gate of Dharma, basically managing the complex intersection between cosmic truths and earthly realities. And Step 3, the ultimate goal, to make that invisible, incomprehensible faith understandable to the people of Earth. He's literally bridging the gap between the infinite and the human, which leaves us with a truly fascinating concept to ponder. If we look through the lens of this specific source material, where history's greatest prophets, from Jesus to Buddha to Muhammad, are framed not as the final word, but merely as puzzle pieces of a much larger cosmic entity, how does that reshape the way we view the entire history of human faith? It's a bold, highly structured way to look at the universe, and it certainly gives us a whole lot to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.